Hello, I'm Esser. I'm a regional extension specialist with Washington State University. My primary focus is working with dryland wheat producers. And today I'm going to talk about Trax, a new seed-applied insecticide for wireworm control in our cereal grain systems. Just a little background. We've spent a lot of time over the years looking at wireworms, especially since 2008. Here's one of the large studies I'll be kind of talking about. We see large wireworm populations and crop damage throughout our cereal grain cropping systems here in the Pacific Northwest. And when you start taking a closer look at some of the wireworm damage, you pull up these plants and this is some of what you're seeing. The flag leaf coming out is dead, and that's one of the telltale signs I've always looked for wireworm damage. You start taking a closer look at this plant down here by the crown, and you're going to see a little incision in there where that wireworm has chewed up into the crown and subsequently killed this plant. When did this problem start? It really started with the removal of lindane. Farmers used lindane for 25, 30 years as a seed-applied insecticide, but it was removed from the marketplace in 2006. It was replaced with neonic insecticides, which are group 4A, and this became the farmer's really only option for cereal grain production. When you look at neonics, you really got three options. You got Cruiser, Gaucho, nips it inside, and there's some differences, but I really call one Ford, Dodge, and Chevy when you're trying to look at the differences. One thing they all have in common, though, is neonic insecticides are toxic to wireworms, but at sublethal doses. This is a nice way for saying it's not very effective at killing wireworms. It just makes them incapacitated to further chew for a few days before they'll come back. So a lot of my focus early on was looking at how do we go and get rid of the population. This is one of the studies we put out, large studies, multiple locations, and here at Sheffels you can see we used 0 ounces of Cruiser, a 1/4 ounce of Cruiser per hundredweight, 1/2 ounce of Cruiser, and then 1 ounce. That was our treatments. But at Sheffels, even as we used increasing rates of Cruiser, no difference at all in the wireworm populations. At the location at Kaufman's, we actually did see a significant decrease in our wireworm populations as we increased the rates of Cruiser, but one of the differences, we're dealing with the different species of wireworms at Kaufman's and Sheffels, and that's the reason for this. But in both locations, even at the highest rate, we still have wireworms present. We looked at other cropping systems. Here we're looking at no-till fallow as a means to provide less food, less habitat, and hopefully decrease wireworm populations. And we saw a 53% decrease in wireworm populations compared to following a continuous spring crop here. However, we still have wireworms present. We started looking at using different crops so we could utilize some different insecticides. And right here we're looking at legumes, chickpeas, a spring crop, and then winter peas were two of the crops that farmers are planting because they could utilize a different insecticide, Capture LFR, as an in-furrow insecticide to help get rid of wireworms. We didn't see a significant decrease, but overall we averaged about 50% less wireworms where we incorporated the legumes with Capture in it. However, we still have wireworms present. Since 2008, examined hundreds of seed-applied insecticide studies, very similar to what you're seeing here. Small plots over the last 10 years, working with over 9 different companies, 29 treatments in 2020. We even examined in-furrow insecticides for 1 year, trying to find something better than the neonics that we could utilize to control wireworm populations in the soil. One of the things with wireworms, unlike a lot of other pests, is that this pest will stay in the soil for multiple years. Depending on species, they'll be in the soil anywhere from 3 to 10 years. So it's something that can keep giving you issues down the line. So some of the general background conclusions, we can sometimes reduce wireworm populations through increased rates of neonicotinoid insecticides, but it really depends on some of the rates and species, but we still have wireworms. We can minimize wireworm populations through intensified management by increasing the amount of summer fallow, by incorporating peas with an in-furrow insecticide. We can reduce wireworm populations. A few of those seed-applied treatments we looked at were equal to or maybe a little bit better than the neonic, and we could do things to manage them, but we still couldn't get rid of wireworm populations. So what does that look like today then? Here's one of the studies that we were working on where we have our check, which is no seed applied insecticide. We have Cruiser at 1.33 ounces per hundredweight. And then we have Traxa, a new seed applied insecticide for cereal grain systems. The check averages 28.7 bushel. The Cruiser treatment here at 1.33 actually yields really well at 62.6 bushel. But then you look at Trax and it averaged 70.1 bushel per acre, significantly greater than these other two treatments. But this is the thing that's really exciting to me. This is just looking at wireworm trap data. I've spent a lot of time looking at wireworms in the soil and doing wireworm counts. And on the check overall, we averaged 13.9 wireworms per trap. In this one particular plot, we have 36 large wireworms and 6 small wireworms. When you look at Cruiser 1.33 ounces, we have 13.3 wireworms per trap. No difference whatsoever in the amount of wireworm populations with the heavy Cruiser rate versus the check. But one of the cool things that we're seeing with Trax is coming back the following year, we don't have wireworms in the soil. Average significantly less wireworms, 0.1 wireworm per trap. And that was one of the really cool things that really excited me about Trax, is not just the yield increase, but we can finally get at the heart of this pest and really work at that population in the soil. Okay, so we see the reduced wireworm population here. What does that mean for a farmer? This is coming back the second year using a check over all 3 treatments. So no seed applied insecticide the second year on those treatments. You can see the check right here averaged 11.4 bushel per acre. Where we used a heavy rate of Cruiser the previous year and came back with a check, 7.6 bushel per acre. No difference whatsoever. So we never saw any benefit of that Cruiser in that second year. Where we had Trax of the first year, came back with a no insecticide check, 68.7 bushel an acre. Obviously significantly better than these other 2 treatments. And you're seeing a real big benefit to being able to get rid of that wireworm population in the soil. And this is what type of yield potential we have out there. And the main takeaway is we never harvested any of these checks the second year, except for the Traxa treatment. What is Traxa? The active ingredient is broflanilide. It's a unique mode of action, a new mode of action, something we haven't utilized in our cropping systems. It's currently an EPA registration in the United States for cereal grains only. They're hoping to maybe get some additional crops on there. Traxa moves in the plant a little differently than the neonic insecticides. It moves in the phylum, so it moves down into the plant, and you're not going to get any Hessian fly or aphid control. The neonics, they move within the xylem of the plant, so they move up into the plant, and you get some Hessian fly and aphid control with neonics. So if those are a major concern in your region, you may still have to look at using some neonics with Traxa for some of the Hessian fly and aphid concerns. Just in conclusion, Traxa is a seed-applied insecticide. It really has a potential to be a game changer in controlling wireworms in our cereal grain systems. I think it's going to be a great rotational fit for farmers in the dryland and irrigated agriculture. If you can get rid of the wireworms and really zero out that population, it gives you a lot of cropping opportunities that second year. Stand establishment protection and yield is equal to or better than the neonic seed-applied insecticides. That's very consistent in my research. However, it does reduce the subsequent wireworm populations by over 99%. This has a significant positive impact on the subsequent crops. We saw that where we used Traxa the first year, came back with no Traxa, still a terrific yield. Once again, the active ingredient is broflanilide. It's a new group 30 metadiamide insecticide, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes moving forward. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, comments, or want to know a little bit more about my research, please feel free to contact me. Thank you for watching.